we've kind of addressed the whole prone to root rot, because that drives me crazy. I think it's dumb that some of these influencers are showing that die off. They're very little. I mean, we're talking a plantlet like this tall. Why the Thai Con will never be cheap. You know, I hate videos.
It became personal with me.
Well, it seems as if I've ruffled some feathers in the houseplant community. TechPlant, a channel 10 times bigger than us, came down off the mountain on Sunday, July 2nd, calling out my theory about Thai Constellation. So today we're gonna prove some points. This video from TechPlant or Matt wasn't directed only at me. I believe it was a little bit at Kaylee Ellen and some other Facebook groups, he said, but definitely there was some hints at me, so I feel like I need to address this. For some context, I've talked a lot about Thai Constellation root rot. This could be happening for a variety of different reasons. It's my theory that this could be happening due to Pythium. It could also be experiencing genetic degradation, and that happens in the tissue culture process. So we're gonna break down all that today through this video. So let's get into it.
You're gonna ask me what my sources are. Well, this was revealed to me in a dream, and that's all you're gonna get. So I highly suggest that you actually look this stuff up, because it's always fun to educate yourself on these topics. But anyways.
No, it's not. Reading scientific journals isn't fun. That's why no one does it. It's more fun to watch YouTube. And that's typically why I don't bore you with the quotes, but I do need to provide the sources. They'll be outlined here, and I'll link them down in the description if you want to read more.
This V2 tissue cultured plant, you know, it's just got problems. It's root rot prone.
So let's talk prone to root rot, or root rot susceptibility. The Thai Constellation is more root rot prone than other Monsteras, other aroids, and other plants that are in tissue culture. We grow a lot of plants from tissue culture, like this Philodendron Tortum. This was taken out of the flask 2 days ago, 48 hours. We'll probably lose none of these plants. These Monsteras that I went into my greenhouse today to go see, we're gonna lose probably about 25% of those, and they've been in aroid mix for over a month. They've been out of the flask for 2 or 3 months, and we lost 2 just today. So what we need to talk about is something called Somalclonal variation. It's something that happens in tissue culture. This source is from the USDA. It's called the National Clean Plant Network. And they say tissue culture propagation involves using larger pieces of tissue, mass production, many subcultures, and often many years in culture, which can lead to undesirable traits in progeny. In other words, if you subculture a plant too much, because it's not taken from the chunk of Monstera originally, you take a original chunk and then you get a small plant from it, and then you subculture that and multiply it over and over and over. But if you do that too much, the genetics of the plant change, even though it's supposed to be a clone. So that's what somalclonal variation is. And that's probably what is happening here with the Thai Constellation. We've had it for 5 or 10 or 15 years out. I made a video on that. I actually spoke with the woman who made Thai Constellation, put it into tissue culture first, and her first versions of Thai Constellation are beautiful, and the versions she still have are incredible. So sometimes that somalclonal will change the genetics for the good, and you'll get really pretty creme brulees and other things that are different plants. It's still the same species, but it has a different genetic code. But sometimes it can lead to undesirable traits like root rot susceptibility.
It's not like plants just like, oh, I get root rot sometimes, right?
There's actually a great study on caladiums where they talk about the different root rot susceptibility to Pythium from about 11 different cultivars of the same species. 8 of them got root rot from about 35% to 94% of their rotted tissue. And 3 of the cultivars only experienced 5% to 14% of root rot throughout their tissue. So the same species, different cultivars within that species experience root rot at different rates. And Thai Constellation is just a cultivar of Monstera deliciosa, just like Monstera albo is a cultivar of it, or mint. They're all slightly different genetic variations of deliciosa, and they all have different susceptibility to root rot. Finally, to close out root rot susceptibility, let's think about spider mites. I have a Monstera deliciosa, and I have a calathea, or calathea, however you say it. And I inject spider mites into this sealed grow chamber. Which plant will get the spider mites first? The calathea. Yeah. After it's eaten and killed the calathea, it will go over to the heavier, thicker leaves of the Monstera deliciosa and eat that plant next. So one might say it has more spider mite resiliency than a calathea.
We're not talking like some guy's basement who makes like 20 plants. We're talking right here. This is the V2, the infected with Pythium one, the crazy one. the V1, so everyone keeps calling these V2, which drives me crazy because it sounds foolish to me. It's like just like made up crap. It could be V5 for all we know. So V2 sounds so stupid to me, but so I don't think the V2, this little nasty V2, look at it, gross V2 is any
Great. We might be in V54 of Thai Con. It doesn't really matter, but we're definitely in something past 1. Technically, each time you subculture the plant, you'll be in a different version of it, I guess. But as we talked about Somalclonal variation, each time you subculture that plant over and over and over, and leave it in all these strong hormones, which you tissue culture inside of, you leave more risk of genetically changing that plant forever. And that's where we're at. And likely, a lot of these labs in Asia didn't update the mother plant by taking a new chunk of stem and putting it down into the multiplication media.
I highly doubt they're selecting some like really weak mother plant to take the cuttings from, right?
It's much easier, if you've done it, to simply just multiply the plants you already have in multiplication media. It's called subculturing. But what I can tell you from people down in your comment section and in mine, and just talking with our different consumers, as well as people who grow these plants at scale, this batch that came out this year and in 2022 is far less resilient than the batches that have came out in previous years that we've all grown out. I'm not sure if this is your first Thai Constellation, but I can tell you from growing out a few hundred, if not a few thousand, this batch is far more susceptible to root rot.
And they're calling it creme brulee, I think, is a dessert. People will look for like any little like lie to like differentiate their plant from the rest. You know, theirs is exclusive. V1, Legacy Thai Con, like that kind of stuff is just so disgusting. And it's only people selling plants come up with that crap. Like, it drives me nuts.
There's tons of different varieties of Thai Constellation Variegation, just like there is with Albo. And based on that variegation level and the quantity of coloring in the stem will dictate the price of that plant. There's recently been a Ken's Philodendron, they call it the Cosmos, which essentially is like a Thai Con that they bred or selected nodes perfectly. And it went for $39.74, $3,900. So I think maybe you just haven't seen enough Thai Constellation to see that there really is differences in the varieties. For instance, the woman in Thailand that created the Thai Constellation in tissue culture has the craziest genetics of it. And if you see them side by side with like a kind of lower variegation, crappier plant with light speckling, which might be coming from the Somalclonal variation, the variegation might be decreasing over time, you'll really see the difference between these like cheesecake or creme brulees or whatever people want to call them. They're just beautifully variegated plants, and I want one of those instead of a gently variegated plant personally. And so do other people, so they pay more for it. I do agree the naming is stupid. It's just like weed names. People keep calling it the new next thing. At the end of the day, it's deliciosa. They are different plants. They're different varieties. They likely have different DNA.
What we're really seeing is people are freaking out because the price is getting lower and lower. These things are going from flask to shelf really fast. And a lot of people are just getting really young, fragile Monsteras and they're losing them. And that's as simple as it is.
So it's just not that simple. We deflask a bunch of tissue culture each week. We do Philodendron Tortum, we do Ring of Fire, Paraiso Verde, Musa, Thai Constellation, and without a doubt, Monstera Thai Constellation is much harder than something like a Tortum. And typically, the process isn't that crazy with Philodendron and many other tissue cultures, many other aeroids, because they're not as sensitive and susceptible to that root rot.
It's usually brought in by your environment. Like you are causing the root rot because you're doing something wrong, right? I mean, that's the plants that I lose to root rot is because I overwater them or I put them in a crappy substrate. Like, it's my fault. It's not that the plant's prone to root rot, right? It's I stuck it in a really poor situation and it perished. Like,
so this blaming of the consumer and the end user of not acclimating them properly and hardening them off is just really unfair. It's just a much harder plant to acclimate than something like Tortum. By the way, Tortum's really easy. With these, we get about 97 to 99% success rate. With Thai Constellation, we're getting somewhere between 70 and 80%. I rarely need to treat these with a fungicide and Bacillus subtilis or Trichoderma horozinum T22. But with Thai Con, I need to treat with a fungicide like Captain. I definitely need to use Bacillus subtilis on those aeroid mix I showed you guys that I was at my shop today. They're dying off left and right, and I'm still hitting them with Tribuse every day, but it's just not working. That's why I haven't reported back to you guys on that one. And I've grown hundreds of Monstera deliciosa regular without variegation from seed and had no problems with damping off from small little seeds.
Now I'm seeing these crazy videos online where they're like declaring that the parent was infected with Pythium, the spooky Pythium.
It might be Fusarium, Phytophthora, or Pythium. I can't definitively say, it is a theory, but I am losing Thai constellations left and right via a blackening of the stem. But it's likely one of two things happening, or both at the same time. Either the plant was infected with Pythium, and we'll talk about how that can happen from the mother plant, or this plant is experiencing that weakening of the genetics, which is making it susceptible to Pythium. I don't care if it came with it or it caught it later on, this plant is very susceptible to Pythium and other sorts of stem and root rots, no matter where they come from. So I think we need to talk about what is Pythium. Very simply, Pythium is a fungus-like oomocyte. It's a parasite that starts at these small little spores. They're about 2/100th of a millimeter. They are tiny, they're very microscopic. And they've been known to hang out just kind of in the dust or on the ground or inside of plants and actually inside of the digestive tracts of animals for years. And they can definitely live in the roots and the stem of plants that have died off or other cuttings, and then works its way into your roots and then makes its way into the stem of your plant. It goes in there and eventually excretes an enzyme that like melt your root and melt the rest of your plant. It kills a ton of crops throughout the US and it affects a lot of houseplants. Again, the Pythium coming from the mother plant is a theory of mine. To be honest, I took this from my previous work in the cannabis industry. We had a rule of thumb where we would never take a cutting of a plant that already had root rot, because I guess the anecdotal kind of bro science was that future cutting of that mother plant would then have root rot. That's what we anecdotally found. And from source number 2, a direct quote is, Pythium are not seed-borne, but they can reside in clonally propagated stock, such as seed pieces of potato, sweet potato, sugarcane, or transplants of strawberry. So they can reside within the seed too, and the stem and the vascular system of a plant, as well as I said, fungus gnats and other flies also.
So if there's Pythium present in that flask, it should just mutilate that plant very quickly. Like, it's not like it can just like hang out, right? That it's just like waiting until that exact moment to strike and kill, right? If it's going to cause problems, it's going to be in tissue culture.
It's actually fascinating that these little spores, these little circles, they actually wait to germinate until they're in an unsterile environment. So something like outside of a tissue culture bag, because the tissue culture bag or the jar or the vessel or whatever you want to call it is sterile. So actually these little spores, they wait for a thing called root exudates. So essentially it's like a sugar or an amino acid that is excreted from a root of a germinating plant in soil typically. And once these little spores, they're so smart, I guess, they sense it, they sense the exudate coming out of the root, then they are waiting and then they attack. So the oospores remain dormant and wait until an unsterile environment is found. And to give you another direct quote, oospores of Pythium ultimum, which creates a lot of root rot, were dormant at first, but became increasingly germable, like germination rate, with time exposure to non-sterile soil extract. Germination exceeded 90% after about 6 weeks in soil extract. So once these little spores were inside of this soil extract with the microbes, then they release and germinate.
And a lot of these huge labs that do millions of plants a year have protocols set up where they really sterilize this tissue and they work from that.
So you think that tissue culture can get rid of Pythium? That would make sense, right? But let's think about this logically. If you actually go through the sterilization process of an explant, so you take off a small piece of a plant and then you put it in the 10% bleach solution that we typically do for 5 to 30 minutes, all of the exterior of that plant is clean, right? Just like if you put bleach on your skin, the bacteria on your skin would be gone, but the bacteria inside your body would still remain. So that's how I think about the oospores being potentially inside the mother stock. Again, this is a theory, it hasn't been proven, but there's something going on where the Monstera Thai Constellation has Pythium in it. And a direct quote for this is, oospores are also resistant to chemical sterilants. Typically, direct contact with bleach, oospores will die, but again, if they're inside the xylem and the phloem of this chunk of Monstera Thai Con stem that you put into tissue culture, they will be protected because they'll be inside.
And so I just highly doubt that there's this like infected Pythium, because it really affects roots. It's not, I don't think, from the limited research I've seen, it's not like it's like hiding inside the plant somewhere. Like.
And another direct quote about them living in stems, oospores survive in old crop debris such as undecomposed roots and stems that were infected earlier. Now, usually in large plants, Pythium can exist. It's like the ultimate parasite. It has a symbiotic, not really symbiotic, has a parasitic relationship with the host and just lives on it. So when you get a Thai Con that's grown up larger, it probably still has Pythium down in the root zone, but it's just surviving with it. Finally, a direct quote from the USDA. They say tissue culture does not eliminate viruses. Now, this isn't a virus. This is a parasite, but it proves the point that a virus can hide within tissue culture and it can stay within that stem without being cleaned out. So just because you're cleaning the outside of the plant doesn't mean that everything within the xylem and the phloem and the vascular system of that plant is clean.
And another like final thing is something I'm seeing in a lot of these videos too is it's like, why the Thai Con will never be cheap. You know, I hate videos. Every influencer, I'm sure I've probably done this in the past, and I guess I'm gonna say I've learned from that. It's so dumb to ever say. Anyone who says that this plant's never gonna get cheaper, they're always somebody selling plants. Is anytime there's money involved, like, don't believe anyone, because it's always about the money. It's always about the money.
So it's a pretty cynical take, right? Sometimes companies definitely do lie, of course. But in my case particularly, I'm just sharing my experience. First and foremost, I make honest plant content. Net, the Thai Con video that you're commenting on made us sell less Thai Cons. Here's actually a canceled order from a customer after they saw our Instagram video of this, why the Thai Con won't ever be cheap, talking about potential Pythium being infested in this plant. They canceled their order because of seeing that. And just to make you understand my logic of saying Thai Con won't ever be cheap, it's the same way that I don't think Calathea or Calathea will ever be cheap. It's always on a wholesale list about $3 to $4 more expensive at the 6-inch pot level than something like a pothos or a peace lily or a spider plant. It's just a little bit tougher to treat with the right humidity levels. It's more susceptible to spider mites and other bugs, and it's just a more challenging plant. If that's here and spider plant's here, then Thai Con's here or here. Hey, and Costa Farms even had trouble producing this plant. So if you haven't grown a bunch out of it yourself, I'd honestly be happy to send you even a few bags of it in the tissue culture bag and see how you do with the acclimation process out of 10, because you'll probably lose 2 to 4, I would say, even if you use a fungicide as well as bacillus, which creates antibiotics. So I wasn't a big fan of that part of the video. You cannot trust me, that's fine, but I do sleep well at night. I teach people about things. If you want to come and shop, then so be it, and that's great. If not, watch the free content, it's free. So next time, feel free to tag me, Matt. I am happy to go deeper in on the science with you personally, or we can do another one of these back and forth videos. I hope it's useful to the consumer and the viewer so that they can learn too about the process of Thai Constellation. I think a lot of this is theory, but at the end of the day, when we're growing plants and kind of learning and going back and forth, there's no ill will. And even if I'm selling something, I'm genuinely being honest. You don't have to believe me, that's fine. But I am, and I know that. So until then, I hope you enjoyed this cup of tea as much as I did. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great 4th of July.